Hello viewers, you're watching Bureaucrat 1 video. In this video, we will see the India in the 18th century. One of the common misconceptions is that British Empire replaced Mughal Empire after rule of 1857. The reason for such misconception is due to lack of poor understanding of India in the 18th century. Therefore, I quickly understand the events that happened during 18th century India. During the 18th century, along with the decline of Mughal Empire and the rise of British Empire, we also saw the rise of many semi-independent states. The decline of Mughal Empire started in the year 1707 after the death of Aurangzeb. The All India character of Mughal Empire reduced to Delhi Kingdom after the Third Battle of Panipat in the year 1761. Then the kingdom was reduced to a political front for the various power contenders after the Second Anglo Maratha War in the year 1803. Finally, after the revolt of 1857, the entire Mughal apparatus was replaced and India became the colony. Of a British government officially. But the rise of semi-independent states started long back in the year 1724 when Nizam-Ul-Mulk founded the city of Hyderabad. During this period, the British East India Company was fighting these semi-independent states and not the Mughal Empire, as it was practically non-existent. Before we begin, we will see the political hierarchy of 18th century India. At the top, we have Mughals and then the provincial states governed by governors and mansabdars. For example, even Chhatrapati Shivaji was a mansabdar. And then we had a petty rulers and zamindars. Decline of Mughal Empire gave rise completely under Mughals. Three types of states originated after the decline of Mughal Empire. First one being succession states, second rebellion states, and third states outside the Mughal influence. The succession states are Bengal, Awadh, and Hyderabad. These are under the nominal supremacy of Mughal Empire after it got succeeded from the Mughal Empire. It was governed by the governors of Mughals. Next is the rebellion states. These are Marathas, Afghans, Jats, and Punjab. These were governed by chieftains, local petty chiefs, zamindars, at cases even by peasants. And the third states, the states outside Mughal influence, or in southwest, that is Kerala, southeast, that is Tamil Nadu, and northeastern India. Earlier, East India Company was fighting with Mughals. Now, after the decline of Mughals, they started to fight with these newly formed with the local zamindars, and also they were fighting among themselves. A common feature of these states are the states tried to legitimize their position by acknowledging the supremacy of Mughals. Succession states inherited the functioning of Mughal administrative structures. State rulers ensured law and order, viable economy, and grounds for appointment of their subordinates. Nor did the rebels pay much attention to the religion of the rulers. But they remained a rent-extracting state just like Mughals. And also the zamindars and jagirdars fought over the income from the agriculture. And they didn't modernize the industrial and commercial structure of the states. Coming to one of the first semi-independent state is Hyderabad and Carnatic. Hyderabad was founded by Nizam-Ul-Mulk Azaf Shah in 1724. He was rewarded with the Viceroyalty of Deccan for his role in overthrowing Sayyid Wazir at Emperor Muhammad Shah's office from 1722 to 1724. But he went back to Deccan since all his reformation attempt was squashed by the Emperor Muhammad Shah Rangila, and he founded the state of Hyderabad. Carnatic was a Mughal Shah that came under the control of Nizam of Hyderabad. Since of Mughal Emperor, the Nawab of Carnatic also acted independently. As such, the deputy governor of Carnatic, that is the Nawab of Carnatic, freed himself from the Viceroy of Deccan, that is Nizam, and made itself a hereditary post. Thus, Nawab Sadatullah Khan appointed his nephew Dost Ali without the approval of superior Nizam. Hence, after 1740, there were repeated struggles for Nawabship, which also further deteriorated the affairs of Carnatic. This deterioration gave an opportunity for European trading companies to directly interfere in the Indian politics, which led to Anglo-Carnatic Wars. State also followed the common feature we discussed earlier. Coming to the next independent state, Bengal. Among many rulers, Murshid Quli Khan and Aliverdi Khan were two important rulers of Bengal. and it was these two rulers who made Bengal independent. Murshid Quli Khan was appointed as the governor of Bengal in 1770, but then he acted as a de facto ruler since 1700 when he was appointed as a Diwan. Though he was independent, he sent a huge tribute to emperor. After his death in 1727, his son-in-law Shuja-ud-Din ruled Khan, made himself a Nawab. Both these rulers expanded trade as it benefited their people. They also encouraged merchants, both Indian and foreign. Tanas and chowkis were established for safety of roads from thieves. They also checked the private trade by officials. They also prevented the abuses of the customs by the officials. There was strict control of foreign trading companies which compelled East India Company to pay the custom duty and obey the law of land. But then they failed to put down East India Company's military tendency, even though they had the capacity to do. So they failed to see that the representation of most aggressive expansionist colonialism of that time, due to ignorance and lack of contact with the rest of the world. They also neglected the army. For example, Murshid Quli Khan had only 2,000 cavalry and 4,000 infantry. In case of Ali Khan, there were repeated invasions by Marathas. After the death of Ali Khan, his successor Siraj-ud-Dawla succeeded to the throne of Nawab. But then he was defeated by East India Company in the War of Plassey and Buxar that happened between the years 1756 to 67. Coming to the next important independent state, or the 1722. He was a bold, energetic, iron-willed and intelligent ruler. He was succeeded by his nephew Safdarjung, who was also a Wazir of Empire in 1748. And also he was the governor of province of Allahabad. He secured the support of Jat and Marathas in the war against Rohillas and Bangash Pathans. They won the war with the Zamindars, they improved the life of the peasants, they ensured law and order and viable economy and trade in their state. There were no discrimination against appointment of their subordinates. For example, the highest post was given to Hindu Maharaj in high standard of personal morality and ensured an equitable system of justice. Because of the prolonged period of peace and economic prosperity in the state under the Nawabs, distinct Lucknow culture evolved. It even rivaled the culture of Delhi, and it became an important center for handicrafts. Now coming to the next independent state, Mysore. Two important leaders of Mysore are Tipu Sultan and Hyder Ali. That we will see a brief history of Mysore. Mysore had independence ever since the end of Vijayanagar Empire. It had been only a nominally part of Mughals. It was ruled by Chikka Krishnaraj and reduced Chikka Krishnaraj to a puppet. But these two were replaced by Hyder Ali and became Sultan of Mysore in 1761. Before that, he was a soldier in Mysore army. He quickly rose in the Mysore army to high ranks. He established modern military troops with Western military training at Dindigul in 1755 with help of French experts. He occupied Malabar to have access to Indian Ocean. He also introduced Mughal administrative and revenue system in his dominion. He took over Mysore when it was weak and made it a powerful state. He also controlled the polygars. He was religiously tolerant. He was constantly fighting with British East India Company and finally died in the Second Anglo-Mysore War in 1782. But then he repeatedly defeated British in earlier wars, especially in War of 1769. Also in constant war with Marathas. After his death, his son Tipu rose to the throne and became Sultan of Mysore. He was an innovator, well-read and also a member of Jacobin Club. He brought in many changes. For example, he introduced new calendar, new system of coinage, scales of weights and measures, and also he planted a tree of liberty and became a member of keen interest in French Revolution. He introduced modern military. His military was armed with muskets and bayonets in European fashion, yet they were made in Mysore. He also established 2 dockyards to build a strong navy in the year 1796. He also designed many ships by himself. He made the position of polygars non-hereditary. He developed an extensive foreign relations and trade relations with countries like France, Turkey, Iran, Peru, Myanmar, and China. When British occupied Mysore in the year 1799, they were surprised to find peasants in Mysore were more prosperous than the peasants in British-ruled Madras. The peasantry of his dominion are protected and their labor encouraged and rewarded. Their agricultural land was well cultivated and the cities were populated with industries and also industrious inhabitants, and most of the cities were newly found and the commerce was extending beyond Mysore. He was a secular ruler and he was religiously tolerant. He even financed goddess Sarda in Sringeri temple, and also he sent lot of gifts to Ranganath temple in Srirangapatnam. Coming to the next state, Kerala. It was not under Mughal rule. In Cochin, Chirakkal and Travancore under Martanda Varma. All this, Travancore is the most important state within the state of Kerala. It was ruled by Martanda Varma from the year 1729. He defeated the Dutch. He also conquered Quilon and Elayadam. He was one of those rare foresighted ruler of that time. He was one of those rare foresighted ruler of that time. He was courageous. He was a leading statesman. He also established a strong army on the Western model. He expanded his empire from Kanyakumari to Cochin. He made many infrastructural developments in his state, like irrigation works, canals and roads. He also promoted the Malayalam literature. Under his rule, he saw the revival of Malayalam literature. After his death, his successor was Rama Varma. He himself was a poet, scholar, musician and a renowned actor. Next, let's see the areas around Delhi. Around Delhi, we had Rajputs, Jats, Bangash. The two important leaders of 18th century are Jai Singh and Ajit Singh. Due to the Mughals' policy of appeasement, conciliation and peace after the death of Aurangzeb, various demands of these Rajputs were satisfied by the later Mughals. For example, Bahadur Shah restored the city of Amber to Jai Singh, which he gave it to Vijay Singh, and also Bahadur Shah restored the city of Marwar to Ajit Singh. But then his demand for high mansabs and subedars of Malwa and Gujarat was not satisfied by Bahadur Shah. But then these two demands were satisfied by the later Mughals. Specifically, it was satisfied by the nobles. For example, Zulfikar Khan, who was the noble at the time of Jahandar Shah, gave the title Mirza Raja Sawai to Jai Singh and also the title of Maharaja to Ajit Singh. And also he made Jai Singh as a governor of Malwa and Ajit Singh as a governor of Gujarat. But then there were no unity among Rajputs and they were divided, and there were constant civil wars among Rajputs. And also there were a lot of internal politics that led to corruption, conspiracies and treachery. For example, Ajit Singh was killed by his own son. Among these two Rajput kings of 18th century, it was Jai Singh, also called as Raja Sawai Singh, a statesman, reformer, lawmaker and a science enthusiast. He also founded the city of Jaipur. He tried to reduce the lavish wedding among Rajputs, which actually led to female infanticide. As a science enthusiast, he was the one who was responsible for installation of observatories in Delhi, Jaipur, Ujjain, Varanasi and Mathura. Because he was also an astronomer. During his period, he oversaw the translation of elements of geometry by Euclid. And also, the work on construction and logarithm by Napier was also translated under his leadership. Coming to the next important state, under Jats. Translated under his leadership. Coming to the next important state, under Jats. Jats were caste of agriculturalists and they were concentrated in the area around Delhi, Agra and Mathura. Jat peasants around Mathura revolted under the leadership of their Jat Zamindars in 1669 and then again in 1688. This in nature. And Jats plundered the rich and poor alike during this revolt. The most important Jat state of Bharatpur was set up by Churaman and Badan Singh. And Jat power reached its highest glory under Suraj Mal, who ruled from the year 1756 to 1763. He was also called as Plateau of Jats. Next is the Bangash, Pathans and Rohillas. Muhammad Khan Bangash, an Afghan adventurer who established his control over the territory around Farrukhabad, which was lying in between Aligarh and Kanpur. After Nadir Shah's invasion, Muhammad Khan carved out a separate state of Rohilkhand, and also he clashed constantly with Awadh, Delhi and the Jats. Next we will see Sikhs. One of the important rebellious state of Punjab was controlled by Sikhs. Sikh religion was founded by Guru Nanak at the end of 15th century. Religion spread among Jat peasantry and other lower castes of Punjab. Under the later Guru Hargobind Singh, Sikhs transformed into a militant fighting community. But only under the last Guru Gobind Singh, Sikh became a political and a military force, mainly because of attacks from both the sides of Punjab. In the west, the state of Punjab was attacked by Nadir Shah and Abdali, and in the east it was attacked by the Mughal Empire under Aurangzeb. After the death of Guru Gobind Singh, the Guruship ended, but the leadership of Sikhs went to Banda Singh or Banda Bahadur. Banda Bahadur waged war against Mughals. He failed to get the support of upper classes and castes. Finally, he was put to death in the year 1715 by Mughals. The foreign invasion and the plunder of Abdali led to weakening of Mughals. This gave an opportunity for Sikhs to reclaim their land, and they occupied Punjab and Jammu. Later on, the Khalsa was divided into confederacies or missils. There were 12 missils, and each one had an equal voice in the decision taken by the missil. But then these things quickly disappeared, and the chiefs constantly quarreled among themselves. But at the end of 18th century, Ranjit Singh, a chief of Sukachakya missil, rose to prominence. He was a strong and courageous soldier and an efficient administrator and a skillful diplomat. He brought the political unification of Punjab and Sikhs. He unified the Sikh chiefs west of Satluj. He expanded the Sikh territory and captured Peshwa, Kashmir, Multan, Lahore and Amritsar. But then it was not a Sikh state. The subordinates were chosen based on merit from all religion. He also had the second best military after East India Company. His army was trained on European lines under European instructors. He also knew his weakness and he didn't. So when British forbade Ranjit Singh to cross Satluj, he kept quiet and he didn't cross Satluj. He also had a good knack for choosing ministers. And his ministers were not only Sikhs but also Hindus and Muslims. Now coming to Marathas. The Marathas were the most important succession states of Mughal Empire. They were the most powerful of the succession states. They alone possessed the strength to fill the vacuum created by the decline of Mughals. They also had the best commanders and statesmen. Then they lacked outlook for all India Empire and unity. In addition, they had all the flaws of Mughal Empire. For example, Maratha chiefs were like Mughal nobles, and the system of Jagis that was introduced in Mughal Empire was similar to the system that was introduced in Maratha Empire, that is Saranjami system. And also they failed to develop a modern economy, that is they remained a rent-seeking state. Just like Mughals, they charged 50% of agricultural produce. They failed to create a modern state, that is they failed to create a political concept of India. To understand Maratha's political history better, we will briefly look into the family tree of Maratha kings. Maratha Empire was founded by Shivaji I by consolidating Maratha Sardars to fight against Mughals, and he had two sons, Sambhaji and Rajaram. Rajaram I had a son called Shivaji II, and Rajaram I's wife is Tarabai, who later became regent to her son Shivaji II after the death of her husband Rajaram I. Sambhaji I had a son named Shahu I, and he was the last de facto ruler of Maratha Empire. Shahu I was captured and imprisoned by Aurangzeb. Shahu I was later released by Bahadur Shah I in 1707. After Aurangzeb's death, it was partly to appease Marathas and also partly to let Marathas get preoccupied by a civil war that potentially could break, which eventually had broken out between Shahu and his aunt Tarabai in the name of Shivaji II. In this power struggle, Peshwas became powerful, just like nobles enter the Game of Thrones during the power struggle among the sons of Bahadur Shah after the Bahadur Shah's death. Peshwas were prime ministers in Chhatrapati Shivaji's court. Peshwa headed the council of ministers called Asta Pradhan. It was not a hereditary post and was appointed by the king on merit. Shahu appointed Balaji Vishwanath as his first Peshwa, after which it became hereditary one. Among his two sons, Bajirao I became next Peshwa to Shahu after Balaji Vishwanath died. He had two sons, Balaji Rao and Raghunath Rao. After Balaji Rao I died, Balaji Baji Rao became the next Peshwa. So Shahu had 3 Peshwas. Now when Shahu died, Balaji Bajirao became the de facto ruler. While the later Maratha kings, also known as Chhatrapati, became just nominal heads. When Balaji Bajirao was ruling Maratha Empire, third Battle of Panipat was fought between Marathas and Abdali, which resulted in Marathas' defeat. This defeat shattered the Maratha-based Mughals. Unfortunately, Balaji Bajirao also died due to the shock after hearing the defeat. So Madhav Rao I became the next Peshwa, but soon he died due to TB, and his brother Narayan Rao became the next Peshwa. We will see the political history of Marathas under Peshwas. The first one is Balaji Vishwanath. He was a revenue official and he rose step by step to the level of Peshwa. With his son Bajirao I, he made Peshwa a functional head. Marathas were under Mughal suzerainty by paying yearly tribute and maintaining an army in Deccan in return for Chauth and Sadeshmukhi, and Peshwa assigned greater powers. This was both their strength and the weakness of Marathas. Next, coming to Bajirao, he repeatedly fought with Nizam of Hyderabad, Mughals, Maratha Sardars, and also Raja of Kolhapur. And then, during his period, Kingdom of Maratha became Maratha Empire. After Bajirao died, Balaji Bajirao became Peshwa. Under his rule, Marathas overran whole of India, including Rajputana states, Awadh, Bengal, Hyderabad, Mysore, Punjab, Sikhs, Jats and Rohilkhand. Maratha Empire was for first time became a true all India empire under Balaji Bajirao. Mughal was mere a puppet in their hands, and in return Maratha Chhatrapati Shahu was a puppet in hands of Peshwa. And when Shahu died, Peshwa became the rulers of Marathas. Now that Maratha is a true all India empire, all semi-independent states paid tribute to Marathas in return for peace. And also Marathas under Balaji Bajirao was the actual power behind the now division of India through Punjab. Since Marathas fought with all powers, they did not get any allies when needed. So they were defeated by Ahmad Shah Abdali in Battle of Panipat. At that point of time, that was the world's largest battle in terms of casualty. And cream of their army was lost in the war, and almost everyone in the Maratha Empire lost one of their family members or a relative, which made Marathas weak. And also the battle disappointment broke Balaji Bajirao's heart, and he died soon after. Madhav Rao became next Peshwa in the year 1761 after Balaji Bajirao. Madhav Rao regained the Maratha glory by fighting back with Nizams, Hyder Ali, British and everyone else. And he also brought back Shah Alam to Delhi. Unfortunately, he died in the year 1772 due to tuberculosis. And his brother Narayan Rao became the next Peshwa. But civil war broke out between Narayan Rao and Raghunath Rao, in which Narayan Rao was killed and his son Savai Madhav Rao became the next Peshwa. Disappointed by this, Raghunath Rao intrigued with company against Peshwas. This power struggle led to first Anglo Maratha war, when Raghunath Rao intrigued against Peshwa with company's help. Now that Savai Madhav Rao is the next Peshwa, for example, Gaikwad at Baroda, Bhonsle at Nagpur, Holkar at Indore, and Scindia at Gwalior. At this point, Maratha Empire became a confederacy of states. Mahaji Scindia was the most powerful among them, and he even became more powerful than the Peshwa. And he became emperor's deputy and even controlled Mughal Emperor Shah Alam as his deputy. This resulted in a power struggle between Mahaji Scindia and Nana Padnis, who was a supporter of Madhav Rao. After some time, all the above personalities died, and worthless son of Raghunath Rao became the next Peshwa, and he pitted Maratha Sardars against each other in his rule. Finally, the entire Marathas were defeated in the Second and Third Anglo Maratha War. The study of 18th century India was not complete without studying the three aspects of the society, that is socio-economic conditions in 18th century, education in 18th century, and the social and cultural life of India in the 18th century. You can find the notes of these three topics in the description.